In this lecture, we're going to learn about the manifest file. Creating a manifest file is typically the second step most developers take for creating a progressive web app. To understand why, check out the link in the resource section of this lecture. We can make our apps installable. This will mean the user can add the app to their home screen. If they click on the app, they'll be taken directly to the application they installed. They won't have to open the browser and input the URL to our app. This is highly beneficial because it gives us more presence in the user's browsing experience. This page goes over how we can make an app installable. If we scroll down, we'll come across a checklist of things we need to do to make our app installable. Let's run through the checklist together. The first item says the web app must not have been installed already. This makes sense. We don't want to ask the user to install our app if they've already installed it. The second item states the user be engaged with our app. Most browsers will not ask if the user would like to install the app right away. Every browser expects some user engagement before asking. The criteria as to when a browser asks if the user would like to install the app varies from browser to browser. In most cases, it happens when the user has visited the app 2 times for at least 5 minutes. The first 2 items are beyond our control. The browser handles both items. The third item says we need to serve our app over HTTPS. This is for security reasons. Progressive web apps will have more access to the user's device. It's always good to make sure information is transmitted over a secure connection. There is one exception to this rule. Apps can be installable over localhost. This is for developers to be able to test the installation process. The next item states we need to have a manifest file. A manifest file is a JSON file that describes our application. We can assign a name, add icons, and set the orientation of our app. There are various settings we can configure in the manifest file. It's necessary to add this file because phones will use the name and icon we list in the file to display our app on the home screen. The documentation tells us what properties we need to add. We'll get to this in a moment. The last item in the list tells us to register a service worker. A service worker is a file that can run in the background to handle tasks outside of our app. We'll be looking into what a service worker is in another lecture. We're finished reviewing what needs to be done. We can ignore the first 3 items because they're out of our control for the time being. We'll be focusing on the last 2. We have the option of creating both files, but there's an official solution we can use. The Vite community has curated a plugin for enabling PWA features in an app. Let's install it. Switch over to the command line. If you have the server running, turn it off. Next, run the following command: npm I vite plugin PWA -d. After installing this package, it must be configured with Vite. Open the vite.config.js file. At the top of the file, import the Vite PWA function from the Vite plugin PWA package. Next, inside the plugins array, call this function. This function will handle most of the work. It'll generate the manifest file. In addition, it'll create a service worker, which we'll talk about in a future lecture. Let's configure the features by passing in an object. In this object, set the register type property to auto update. Progressive web apps are partially functional offline. To achieve this feature, the browser must download files from the server and cache them. Caching is a feature for storing a local copy of a file in the browser. This behavior can boost the performance of a site. A file does not need to be downloaded twice. However, it can cause issues. What if a file is updated? The user should download the latest copy. By setting the register type property to auto update, the app will automatically update itself with the latest copy. After adding this property, add the dev options object. This object can contain configuration settings for the development server. Let's set the enabled option to true. By default, a manifest file does not get produced for development servers. It'll only be created during production. We can override this behavior by setting this option to true. That's it. Let's try turning on the server. In the command line, run the npm run dev command. The server has successfully started. The question is, where is the manifest file? I'll answer this question in the next lecture.